How's it going? We doing good? Yeah, all right. Did everybody do like fun outdoor things since this is like the last of this nice weather I think we're gonna have? Fishing? Okay. I am not into fishing at all. I'm sure it was really nice, but that sounds really boring to me, but I hope you had fun. All right, so we're continuing on with this series, the You're Not As Blank As You Think You Are. And today we're going to talk about you're not as smart as you think you are. And the first thing I want to say that hopefully this didn't come off this way at all, but this is not meant to be an insult. I feel like if somebody hasn't been here, they'd come in and be like, what did you guys learn at Fuse? That we're all stupid and not unique and not experienced. And that's not the point at all. So hopefully nobody's taking it that way. I know last week you guys heard from Jen, and then the week before we learned from Gwen. And tonight what we're going to start by looking at is we're going to talk about how our brains work a little bit more and how we go about making the decisions that we make. Where do we get our information from? Where do we get all these facts? How do we decipher it? To ultimately come to a conclusion and to make a decision. And as teenagers, that's something that is kind of new to a lot of you guys, to have the ability to process information that way. Teenagers and adults, you begin to process the world differently than, say, a little kid does. The first big word we're going to introduce here is metacognitive. Okay? Yeah, metacognitive. I'm going to explain that, yes. What? Is that a superhero? No, that is not a superhero. Metacognitive is a fancy way of saying it's thinking about thinking. Okay? Cognitive being thinking, meta is kind of like outside of that. So this is thinking about how we think. Thinkingception. Yeah, the way I always pictured this is like if you're in a situation where you have to think about something or make a decision, it's your ability to kind of step back outside of that situation and kind of analyze it and be like, okay, what's going on here? The most practical example that I can give is, Michelle and I have had this joke before where, and I'm sure you guys have all seen this, where somebody's they're in a bad mood or something's just not coming across quite right. And you can kind of step back and look like, okay, what maybe is causing this? Not necessarily exactly what they're saying. And we've used the word, are you hangry? I don't know if you guys have heard that, which is like hungry and angry. You know, I'm sure as teenagers, a lot of you guys get that, where you're just really nasty and mean and in a bad mood, mainly because you're hungry, not really because you're actually angry about something. So if you were in a situation where, say you were just being mean to a friend or being mean to somebody else and your brain was like, okay, maybe I'm just being mean to them because I'm hungry, that would be thinking metacognitive. You're kind of like thinking about how you're processing information. I think this is a skill that is beneficial to a lot of people, but even a lot of adults don't have that ability to be able to do that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how we think, how we perceive things, all that kind of stuff. Next week, we're going to be doing testimonials, and you guys are going to hear a lot of people come up on the stage and talk about decisions that they made in their past, and maybe how that wasn't exactly the best decision. You guys, if you've been around Fuse long enough, you've probably heard lots of people's testimonials, and it usually starts as, I wish that I knew then what I know now, and I wouldn't have made that decision. And part of the reason we're doing this whole series is just to kind of help prepare you guys and say that maybe to some extent you don't have to repeat that same thing if you are aware of how your brains work and how you process information. So what we're going to do now, kind of right at the beginning, is we're going to go into team time, and we're going to talk a little bit about our decision-making process, where we get advice from, all those kinds of things. Try and stay in this room. I don't think we have a big enough group that we need to go in the other room. It's just going to be a quick team time. The leaders should have a couple questions, and then we'll bring it right back in again. All right, ready, break. All right, I know that Jen did a couple of these last week. But just to kind of reiterate, especially for those of you guys that weren't here, kind of a fun little activity. It's funny how sometimes when we don't have the whole picture on something, it's difficult to have enough information to kind of really figure out what the right decision is or what we're actually looking at. So I know Jen used the example of how things can look differently sometimes when we have the whole picture. So I have some examples. And you guys can jot these down if you want, or if you're capable, you can keep them in your head. But again, just kind of a fun little thing. These are all pictures that are like uber zoomed in, so zoomed in.
Is number one a giant chess set? One is a zipper.
We'll give you the answers in a second. So, and I got a couple more. So these ones first, you can. All right, you guys got all those? I got a couple more. All right, how do you guys think you did? Let's go through these and see how we think we did. Now, when you guys get into like college and if you take a psychology class, this is actually one of the labs you might have is doing things like this. And this particular test of kind of looking at pictures and stuff, they've shown that like smaller age people, before you start to develop that cognitive ability, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, would have a harder time with something like this. But as your brains develop and you can start to decipher all that stuff, it actually becomes easier to figure out what some of these things are, even though some of them are still a little tricky. Number one, zipper. No! It's a zipper. Not a chess set. Number two, any ideas on this one? I heard it. That makes broccoli look even less appealing to me, seeing that zoomed in picture. Really have no desire to eat that now.
Twist tie. Twist tie.
It's a twist tie, yes. Who said that? Was that Raisin Garden Gnome? Well done. Food. Guess that's not wrong. It's an apple. Celery. I love my children repeating everything. A football field? It's a vitamin.
Man, yet the broccoli looks bad.
Yeah, the vitamin doesn't look so good either, zoomed in.
The sun on Matchbox. What's up?
I'm impressed if you actually got that one. Yes, that is the striking part of a Matchbox. Did you cheat or did you actually figure that one out? Ah, well done, well done. Apparently Alec is better at cognitive thinking, or pyromaniac, sure. That is a shoelace, yes. That's a purple crayon. Okay. Yes, that is a crayon. That would be a tape dispenser, yes. I think that was it. Yes. All right. So yeah, I know like Jen did some of those last week, and again, it just kind of shows us that, I mean, you guys actually did really well. I know there were some that were a little harder, but if you asked a 8-year-old or a 9-year-old to do that same thing, they probably would have a harder time. I know my children were giving all the answers, but that's because I think they were just repeating you guys. Yeah, so we're gonna just go over some of the things that Gwen talked about before we keep going here. Come on. There it is. All right. First thing that Jen talked about is that one of the things that happens as you develop as a teenager is you become more and more egocentric, or you have more egocentrism. And what kinds of things comes to mind when somebody says that word? Is that usually looked at as like a good thing or a bad thing if somebody says you're egocentric? Bad. In this context, it's actually not meant as an insult. All it means is that you feel like everyone is watching you and everyone is judging you. Gwen said it's kind of like if you do something embarrassing and you instantly think that the entire room just saw what you did, and a lot of times nobody did. This is something that kind of begins to develop as you're a teenager, that you just basically, and you guys have probably all heard this saying, you feel like the world revolves around you. Your parents have probably told you that you are acting like the world revolves around you, and this is just something that starts to happen around that age.
I feel like that's a good thing to say if you can't breathe. You feel like the world revolves around you.
If you can't breathe? Alright. The second, you tried. That would be an example of the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is learning to think abstractly. Abstract thinking. What this means is that you as teenagers are now starting to gain the ability to jump from A to C. And what that means is, a little kid, they only see the cause and effect side of making decisions. So if my child comes up to me and says, I want a cookie, and I say, you have to pick up your toys, then they know I pick up my toys, I get a cookie. That's just A to B. As a teenager, you might start to look at things like, well, maybe if I keep my room clean, and then I ask, I can say, well, my room's clean. You start to make conclusions where you jump to the next step, and you can start to process information in a different way where you can reach conclusions a little bit differently. Another example would be thinking about things like doing your homework. Okay, when you're in 2nd or 3rd grade, for most of you probably, it was, you have to do your homework. There's really not a question there. Now that you're a little older, you have a little more freedom. You could go hang out with your boyfriend or girlfriend or friend, and you may decide, I'll do my homework later. But I might be tired, but I might be okay to stay up and do my homework. Or maybe I should not go hang out with my friend and do it now. Maybe that's the right thing to do. Or not do it at all, and maybe I'll get lucky and there won't be a consequence. Or copy off somebody in the hall in the morning and turn that in. So your brain starts to think of all of these different possible outcomes and jump to different conclusions. Instead of just, this is what I have to do, you start to process information a little bit differently. In that example with the homework, you also start to then take the reactions to those situations and kind of apply that to, okay, what can I learn now for the next time? And sometimes those consequences can be good consequences or bad. Life is full of all the different choices that you have to make, even if you don't necessarily know what the outcome is. Again, as a small child, usually the outcome is right in front of you. You make this decision, this is what happens. For a lot of you, this is the first time in your life where you have to start making choices where you don't instantly know what the outcome is going to be. If I choose to date a guy or girl who is my best friend, will it end well or not? Will we still be able to be friends? Is it worth that risk? If I choose to play a sport, will I still have time for my friends or to go to church or have a relationship with God? If I choose to go to a particular college and pick this major, will I like it? Will it provide me the future that I want? Those are big decisions that most of you guys are starting to have to make for probably the first time in your lives. And it's really exciting. And I think it gives you that sense of empowerment that you're making decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life. But do you really have the right processes to try and figure out the answers to those questions? If I decide to jump off this bridge with my skateboard, will I break my face? I mean, those are some of the questions that we're starting to ask also. Something. Will I break something? The part of your brain that makes all of these decisions comes from the prefrontal cortex, which in your brain, that's like the front third of your brain. So it's everything behind your forehead, basically. And scientists have showed that that part of your brain is responsible for personality, for cognitive behavior, for how you express yourself, for decision making. Again, if you take psychology classes, they will actually not diagnose somebody with bipolar disorder until you're kind of past puberty. And that's basically because with an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, all kids and teenagers are bipolar. You haven't figured out how to process information consistently in that part of your brain. Again, this part of your brain helps you make decisions based on potential consequences. And they actually say that that part of your brain doesn't finish developing until about age 25. I know Gwen mentioned 2 weeks ago that girls are actually a little bit ahead of boys. So usually they're done developing a little bit quicker. Yeah, so what kind of conclusions can we come to based on this? Basically what this means is that there's thousands of teenagers out there who think that they've discovered all of life's answers, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can process information, but just like those pictures, don't really have enough information to make the best decision. So you think you're making the best decision based on what information you have, but would probably make a better one if you actually had more information available to you. There's all sorts of examples of this, and I don't know, if you guys are like Google junkies where when you're bored you just play on the internet and search weird things, I'm sure you've all looked up things like fail or epic fail or all of those things, and basically those are all examples of people making bad decisions, and we almost find it comical. I have some examples. What?
Just go to Google and type in how to or what is and just watch the most searched things. It's
Okay, that's entertaining in and of itself. Yeah, so I have some examples of people with bad decision making. Working for a long time in the construction industry, we always had to take these like OSHA classes, and they love to give you examples of people that were just doing really unsafe things. This was one of my favorite ones. It doesn't look very smart. This one's pretty funny. Wait for it, wait for it.
It's not a tattoo.
Yeah, at least it's not a tattoo. I've seen some pretty bad ones there too. There's the ever classic examples of bad student drivers.
That totally looks like my person.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Who did that?
Don't worry, I didn't break the pizzazz.
There is a Sonic, yes.
I'm mad at them. That.
There's the... Okay, so my impression of skateboarding in general, I think there's some really cool things that people can do, but taking a 12-inch piece of wood with wheels and riding it downstairs while not wearing a helmet is an example of bad decision making.
That's full lawn chair.
What's that?
Full lawn chair.
Full lawn chair?
Yeah, lawn chair is when you fold yourself.
Oh, okay.
Almost a scorpion.
And of course, if you look on Facebook, and if I'm friends with you guys, you've all had examples where I've sat there on the couch at night and laughed because of something that somebody said. Yes, plenty of examples. I think this is what Facebook is all about, is people posting things that they've done so we can laugh at them.
problem with words,
You can't see their name. They don't want you to know that they're the one
Wow.
Yep.
Did anyone else use to take the last quiz? Wait,
Wait!
It's a simple mistake.
The math for real shows up all by itself.
This one was my favorite. Yeah. Alyssa, your mom would appreciate that one too, I'm sure.
It's not the worst we've seen. So.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So, plenty of examples of bad decision making. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to look at an example of this that's in the Bible. So if you guys have your Bibles or you have your electronic devices, you can pull it out. And this is, if you guys didn't know, most of the disciples were thought to have been teenagers. So not unlike yourselves. And there are some examples in the Bible where they exhibit this wonderful kind of behavior. The first one, it's Matthew 16, 13. So if you want to pull that out and you kind of follow along, we'll go through the story a little bit. And this is the Peter complex, yes.
Oh wait, it's 13, 16. You said 16,
13, 16 to 23. So this is the story when Jesus comes to the disciples and says, "Who do you say that I am?" Or who are people saying that I am? And the disciples all start answering based on what they've heard from people out on the streets and what the Pharisees are saying and all this stuff. And Peter answers in a brilliant way. And Jesus' response, and this is Matthew 16, says that you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. So Jesus says, basically, Peter, that was a brilliant response. Peter says that he is God, basically. And Jesus tells him that the only way he could have known that is that the Father in heaven revealed this answer to him. So then the question is why, and I guess I kind of just gave the answer, but why did Peter get this answer correct? Why did Peter answer correctly to the question? Because he's smart? What did Jesus just say? Why did Jesus just say that Peter got the answer correctly? Yeah, because God told him what the answer to the question was. God showed it to him. If you guys continue reading, does anybody have it pulled up?
Yes.
What is Peter's response after that? So that would be, 18? 18-ish, if you want to paraphrase it too. How does Peter respond after Jesus says, "Peter, that was brilliant," basically?
I've not seen that.
Yeah, we have the parable of the sower
And
explained.
then it gets ahead to Jesus predicts his death.
Okay,
Is that what you want me to get into?
sure. Skip ahead to 21 to 22.
Do you want me to read it? Paraphrase?
Or you can paraphrase it.
Okay. So then Jesus tells everyone that he's going to die and then come back to life. Peter tells him, no, that's not going to happen. Basically, I'll protect you. Is kind of what he seems like he's getting at.
Okay. So, Peter responds that, Jesus, you're the Son of God, you're the Messiah. Jesus replies, Peter, that's a brilliant answer. The only way you could have known that answer is that it was revealed to you from my Father in heaven. Same conversation, Jesus starts explaining to them how he's going to die and how he's going to be killed and everything else. And Peter says, no, you're not, and starts arguing with him. Does that sound like it fits? I mean, that's kind of like, I guess, what a lot of teenagers do. just because maybe you don't have all the information and that you're not as smart as you think you are doesn't mean that you're not smart. And Peter was very smart, but also not at the same time. And then Jesus' response, and if I was hanging out with him, I would never want him to say this to me, but in 23, do you still have it pulled up, man? Do you know what he says in 23? You know what he says? What does he say?
Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah, get behind me or get away from me, Satan. So Jesus calls him Satan, and basically, yeah, not something you want Jesus to tell you. And like I say, teenagers tend to make kind of the same mistake, that just because you're not as smart as you think you are doesn't mean that you aren't smart. And I think there's varying degrees to that. So your brain is starting to be able to process all this information and make decisions, and sometimes those decisions are going to have really good outcomes, and you're going to be patting yourself on the back. Wow, look, I made that really good decision. Even when it comes to our relationship, with Christ, we're forced to make those kinds of decisions. Things like, do I go to this dance or do I go to this retreat? Or, how do I spend my time? You guys have to start making a lot of those decisions. And I'm sure those times where you have a good outcome and you're very proud of the decision that you've made, and then 30 seconds later you make another decision and it's the face palm, what were they thinking? Which as leaders, and I'm sure if you talk to a lot of leaders, is one of the entertaining things, I guess, about being a youth leader. So then, where do we go from here, I guess, is the next question. And how do we help to eliminate some of those bad making practices? You guys talked in your small groups kind of about where we go to get the answers when we're faced with these questions. Okay, I guess that was it. I thought there was something else in there. In Proverbs 19 and 20, it says, get all the advice and instruction you can so you'll be wise the rest of your life. So what that's saying is, go and seek out people who can help you and give you instruction, and that will help you become more wise the rest of your life. You don't just need lots of advice, you need quality advice, and you can get that in a lot of different places. My question to you would be, and I guess this is probably very appropriate for GT because of his situation today, but if the brakes on your car are about to go out or something is about to break on your car, do you take it to a mechanic or somebody who's been fixing cars their whole life? Or do you take your car to your best friend who just learned how to drive yesterday and doesn't speak car?
Or C, let it blow up the street.
Or what?
C, let it blow up in the middle of the street.
Or C, let it blow up in the middle of the street. I mean, that's kind of a rhetorical question because we would all say, yeah, of course you're going to take it to the person who would know how to fix it. Well, that same logic applies to other things too. If I needed open heart surgery, should I go to a well-trained, experienced surgeon, or should I ask my wife who likes to watch Grey's Anatomy?
She would know.
Your wife because she loves you.
Oh, if she watches House, then she's okay. So, same thing. We talked the last 2 weeks about, that you don't have all of the experiences maybe that you think you do, and that maybe you're not as unique as you think you are, which, to kind of lead into today here, that means that there are people out there who've had those experiences, your parents certainly being one, and wouldn't it make sense to go seek advice from somebody who's had that same situation? Who've had those experiences and who can help guide you into making the right choice. If you're struggling with which college to go to, in a lot of situations, your parents maybe aren't the best people to talk to. They may have certain motivations. They may also be a great person to talk to. Maybe talking to a teacher makes more sense. Hey, what's the best option for me if this is what I want to go into or what I want to study? If you're having relationship issues with a boyfriend or girlfriend or friends, does it make sense to ask another friend who maybe has their first boyfriend or girlfriend at the same time? Or maybe somebody who's been in a healthy, relationship or marriage, which hopefully for a lot of you is, your parents or family. I know you guys talked about that in your small group, that all situations are different, and I think hopefully the biggest thing that you walk away from here is maybe a little bit more of an understanding about how you process things. And guys, the truth is that's the reason why we're all here as leaders, is we want to be those people that you can come and talk to and help you to maybe not make some of the same mistakes. We've done this a million times where we've gotten up here and said, you know, this is where my relationship with Christ fell away, and this is what happened, and this is how he renewed me and brought me back. And we don't want that to happen to you guys. So the band, I guess, can start making their way back up. Yeah, that's the biggest thing I want you guys to take away from this, is that you have all these resources and you have all these people that you can go to and that you can get information from, and use those. Hopefully it's your parents. You know, I know a lot of you guys, and I know that your parents love you and care about you, and that they want to be that person you can come to. Some of you guys maybe don't have the best home life, and there are other people that you can come talk to as well. If you guys would just pray with me, the band's going to do a couple more songs, and then you know, hope we have a great week going forward. Lord, thank you so much for just bringing us all here together again this week. I pray that you help this message and this message that we've had over the last couple of weeks just to sink in, that you know, that we're not as smart and unique and as experienced as we think we are, and that we have all sorts of people around us that love and care about us and just want us to continue to grow in you and want us to continue to have a better relationship with you, Lord. And help us to not be afraid, and just to break down any barriers that exist, and help us to seek those people out, seek out those positive relationships, and just help make our decision-making process one that just glorifies you and glorifies your kingdom. Lord, we pray all these things in your name. Amen.